Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins. So we've previously covered some aspects in your environment that have neurological impacts on your brain, things like noise pollution and nighttime light exposure. And today we're touching on something equally impactful in your environment, which is air quality. Short-term exposure to pollution in the air can impair ability to focus on relevant pieces of information while being able to filter out distractions. Air pollution most strongly affects our working memory, the ability to hold and manipulate different pieces of information. And it also affects things like verbal testing, mathematical reasoning, and many other aspects that are tied to this working memory. In addition to air pollution, there are sometimes particles in the air that take away from air quality and can make us very unwell. But what we may not realize is that consistent exposure over time and consistent bouts of illness over time actually degrade some of our brain function. Our brains have specialized immune cells that develop a memory of exposure to some of these airborne toxins, pollutants, and particles that cause illness. They clear up cellular debris and help us maintain our neural health. And after exposure to something like, say, a respiratory virus, they don't just return to their baseline state. They enter into a primed state, remaining on high alert with an inflammatory response for a period of time. And they're there detecting threats so that the next time something comes along, they are primed to react, or in some cases, to overreact. So that priming following the exposure can last for months and even years. And what's tricky about it is that each subsequent infection doesn't just reset the system, it layers on top of it. So they become increasingly reactive over time, producing excessive amounts of inflammatory cytokines, which creates a bit of a cycle. Primed cells producing more inflammation and then remaining in that primed state longer and longer. When they are repeatedly exposed to those inflammatory signals, it can cause a long-term alteration in the gene expression. And those changes can continue for a long period of time, even after that infection is totally cleared out of the body. And so those so-called sniffles may not be as harmless as they initially appear. So the brain's immune cells are being reprogrammed over time to become more and more reactive to those external air factors coming in. And even when something like a respiratory virus never directly touches your brain, your body is releasing those cytokines that travel through your bloodstream. And when that reaches the blood-brain barrier, it can degrade the junction there so that over time, with those continuous, ongoing, repeated infections, that permeability, the ability for things to cross the blood-brain barrier, actually increases. And then the inflammation damages the mitochondria and the cells that form that barrier. And over time, that barrier's integrity can degrade or collapse. And then things that would normally not infiltrate the brain tissue eventually begin to. It's kind of almost like a Trojan horse scenario. And why is this so important? It's relevant because it can have long-term impacts on cognitive function, and it helps us to reassess the value and quality of the air that we breathe. Following ongoing respiratory infections, in many cases, people experience persistent cognitive issues, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, slower processing speed. Sometimes these things are referred generically as brain fog, but it's actually neuroinflammation that affects how your neurons communicate. Glutamate builds up in the synaptic spaces, and too much of that can overstimulate neurons to the point of damage. And often this happens even with very mild cases, leading to significant neuroinflammation. There can also be white matter changes, and the damage is proportional not just to the severity of whatever that external thing coming in was doing, but also, and perhaps more importantly, the frequency. So when there are repeated infections over and over and over again, we see excessive accelerated cognitive decline compared to fewer infections. And that pattern can lead to longer-term neurodegeneration. So it's kind of an interesting contradiction to what is sometimes a commonly held belief that repeatedly getting ill or something like that somehow strengthens the immune system, whereas it actually degrades it, in particular with brain cells, where those specialized immune cells over time can become more functionally impaired. They lose their ability to respond to those external threats and lead to more prolonged immune dysregulation. So it's more true that the immune system is getting worn down rather than strengthened. And that can actually lead to a greater likelihood of catching the next thing as opposed to being able to fight it off. Neurologically, we're not moving on in the same way that the rest of the body does. The brain is accumulating those inflammatory hits, and then it never fully returns to its own baseline. And because most of the time these things are airborne, happening through clean air or non-clean air, the cleaner the air is, the fewer particles that we may be exposed to. So incorporating tools and resources like HEPA filters, removing larger percentages of airborne issues, workplaces, schools, home environments are greatly improved with an increase in ventilation and air filtration, leading to fewer infections and consequently better cognitive performance over time. And that direct impact of air quality on infection frequency affects overall brain health. HEPA filters work very well, so do well-fitted respirators, personal N95 rated filtration, institutional filtration, and things that can filter out those viral particles from the air itself. Ventilation is also very helpful, opening windows, using exhaust fans, improving airflow all around. All of that helps to dilute that particle concentration when we are talking about indoor air. And there can also be generalized improvements with focus, memory, and concentration. And that's something that we experience in real time, not just over the span of years and not just in connection to exposure to particles. Response times on cognitive tests and overall focus, motivation, and concentration is closely tied to how clean the air is. It has a big impact on selective attention and even emotion recognition. So even normal environments that aren't high in pollution but have poor ventilation can measurably impair cognitive function. And we see this impact with these inflammatory responses in the brain, both from particles that are in the air as well as the cleanliness of the air as a whole. However, when we improve air quality, we also improve things like cognitive test scores, cognitive speed, working memory, and overall cognitive load. So it's a very interesting consideration when we take into account the impact that our environment has on our neurological health, our cognitive abilities, and relationship to the environment that we live and literally breathe in. I hope you have found this interesting. And if you are looking for some tools that help to soothe your brain, soothe your nervous system, boost your focus and inspiration, tools like hypnosis, yoga nidra, and meditation can be profoundly helpful. All of these are offered in my monthly mindset membership, the Hypno-Pothecary or the Poth, and that information is available in the show notes. And until we connect the next time, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at ravenmosaic.com.